It brings me great joy when other people get to experience the Neptunia franchise. And we've been having one heck of a past month for Neptunia games. But when starting a brand new franchise, it's always the looming question on where to start. And in this video, I'm going to help you guide you on what games to play within the lineup. Now, the thing about Neptunia, it's not that complicated to get into the franchise and start on certain games. However, there is a great mixture of mainline games and side games. And when it comes to the sidelight games, there's not really a particular order on which you have to play it. Now, there is some times where some side games will mention other games from past side games and mainline games that will be lost to you, but in the core scheme of it, it doesn't really matter which order you play them. However, when it comes to the mainline games, there is a particular order that you should play these games first before any of the side games, because they'll kind of spoil you on stuff that happens, and it just makes more sense to start at the beginning. And here we have my tier list of every single Neptunia game that came out from the first game leading all the way up to the latest game of Game Maker R Evolutions. And before we get to all the fun stuff, we're going to get rid of all the stuff that you can't play anymore and it's not even worth your time. Like the gacha game for Neptunia that didn't really do well, that was only in Japan and got delisted and you can't even play it anymore. So then there was the Connect Chaos Champloo tactical TCG game that was only in Japan that got delisted for a reason, because this game actually I think did surprisingly well and people actually enjoyed it. It just never came outside of Japan and they just stopped making it for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it just didn't do as well as they was hoping it would do. And then there's Neptunia and Friends, which is Neptunia and other Compound Heart games in one game. iOS phone game that didn't come to Android. Technically you can play this game, however there's no current way to play it unless you have a Vita, and it was Neptunia PP.
What?
I know it's making you laugh because we are all 5, but it means Producing Perfection, which was a dating sim rhythm game that was pretty fun when it came out. They didn't release it on Steam for some reason, so you can't even play it. Now that all that is out of the way, we can get into the stuff that actually truly matters. And of course, the first game that you should start with is Hyperdimension Rebirth. It is the same on PS4. You can play the PS4 version or the Steam version or Vita version, but mostly Steam because it's most readily available, or the PS5 version. These are all the same game. Some people might say that Reverse is not the same game. There's some differences. That's a story for another video. But for the most cases, it's pretty much the same story, the same way you play the game, and everything you need to know about the first ever Neptunia game ever. It introduces you to characters, it introduces you to the lore, it introduces you to why they're doing set things, and it's a great game. Honestly, one of my favorite games of all time. I could play this game countless of times. I have, because it's just a fun game to just start and see it and have a nice good rhythm to it. And if you want to start anywhere to learn anything about the Neptunia series from this point, just play this game. And of course, the second game that you should go right in after that is Rebirth 2. It introduces you to more characters, more slow, the second generation of consoles like Netgear and Uni and ROM and RAM, which are the sisters of the regular characters, CPUs of Neptune, Noir, Vert, and Blanc. I should have said that for the first game. And it's really cool. I think one of the concepts about Neptunia that's really fun is a parody of the actual gaming console war of Sega, Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, and then they all had handhelds except for Xbox, so that's why Vert doesn't have a sister, which is sad. But you know, one day maybe Vert can have a sister, maybe if they make a handheld, and Vert can finally get a sister. But regardless, you know, you had the Sega Game Gear, you had the PSP, then the Nintendo DS, which ROM and RAM represents the two both screens, but which is weird because you think they would represent the DS and then the 3DS. You know, you would think that Blanc would have more sisters because she has the Game Boy Advance. Anyway, but I guess that's a story for another day. Leading into the next game, which is Rebirth 3. That is right here. Rebirth 3, and this explains a whole bunch of other stuff. Introduce a bunch of the characters. Probably one of the best CPUs now. A lot of people love like Platia. But this story is kind of complicated, and I don't want to spoil it because there's a lot to go into it. But essentially, these are the first 3 games that you should play in order. These are the trilogy. This is the best in the series. It's the strongest the series has ever been, and you will have the most fun in these games, and it will kind of explain everything after that. Then, after that, you should play, which I'm essentially calling Rebirth 4. Most people don't, but I call it Rebirth 4. But essentially, the real name is Mega Dimension Neptunia V2 Remake, which is a remake of the original game, which we'll get to that in a minute. And it explains the next chapters of the Neptunia series, going into territories about the dead consoles, which is a really good concept, and I really like that. Now, don't be confused by the VR part. It does have VR, but you don't need VR to play it. There's only a section of VR that requires it, which is like you hanging out with the characters in a personal room, and you get to see them virtually and stuff and hang out with them. But the actual core game of the game is just the game, but enhanced visuals, enhanced gameplay, and it's really cool. And I know it kind of confuses a lot of people, but just know the VR is not really the main part of the game. I don't know why they did that, because it was really confusing for a lot of people. These 4, the Rebirth trilogy, well, quadruple, even though people don't call this a 4th Rebirth, but I do, because it makes the most sense. This is where you should play the next game. So Rebirth 1, Rebirth 2, Rebirth 3, Rebirth 4. Okay? Because then you'll get everything that you need to know about the lore of the game industries, about the main characters of Neptune, Noir, Bert, and Blanc, and then the sisters, and then other characters, and another new character that shows up in this part that you should play. The games originally started on the PS3 with Neptunia 1, 2, and 3, and then of course 4 technically. And these games you shouldn't play anymore. One, they're not really available for you to play ready because you need a PS3 to get to play them, and they're the worst version of the games. They were very slow, they were very clunky, they didn't have the enhanced ability that the new games have, and they were a slog to get through. They're fun, but they were a slog to get through. So I would just skip these ones because you don't really need to, because you have these and they're more readily available everywhere else than other places. The same with Mega Dimension Neptunia V2, the original PS4 game. This one has been released on Switch. At this point, again, you should just play the re-enhanced version of it because it does a lot more better for this game. So you don't really need to play this game. It's the exact same game, but enhanced visuals, enhanced gameplay, and everything else. So it's just a way better game than this game. After that, it's kind of free ball of what you want to go with, because everything after this point is just sideline games. And we haven't had a mainline game since Mega Dimension. Now, in my opinion, even though it's a side game, the next one that you should play after all these is Sisters vs. Sisters. Now, even though this is a side game, it is the closest to story-wise of what a mainline game should be. And it kind of referenced a lot of the stuff after this stuff in this game. So I would play this one. Now, you could also play Cyber Dimension, which is the characters get sucked up into an online game and they have to play through the game to get out of the game. Think of Sword Art Online, but like Neptunia, and you get to play with it with 3 other people on your team. Nowadays, you probably won't because not a lot of people play this game anymore, which is sad. Which was a fun game. It was more of a different vibe than these games, which was a hack and slash semi-MMO type game where you could play as one of the characters and each character had their own special abilities. Like Neptunia was a tank and Noir was a DPS, and then Vert was like a mix between, and Blanc was like a healer, but then you had Netgear that was also a healer, but then they all had ways to learn different abilities. It was a fun game. I really enjoyed it when it first came out, and it's still fun to this day, story-wise. However, not a lot of people play it online anymore. It was kind of like a dungeon crawler, but MMO-like. It was fun. It was fun when it came out. And these two can be played in any order, essentially, because this reference stuff in here sometimes, but you don't need to play this before this. But I feels like you could play this one right after these games, because they kind of reference everything from here in these two. So you could play them in any order. And this is Neptunia Sister vs. Sister, which is the second to the latest game that came out before Game R Evolution. And this game pretty much talks about all the things that happened during COVID. Essentially, it's just the COVID game where cell phones started to become more prominent in PC, and the game continent and the game consoles wasn't getting a much praise because people were locked inside and it was a pandemic. There was 2 years gap. I like it, but I don't like it. But the more I played it, I started to understand it more, and it's not the best direction for the series, but I do like it as a Neptunia fan. But I don't like it as a game, if that makes sense. But it's still fun if you're a Neptunia fan. But I don't know if a lot of JRPG fans will enjoy it. But it's still worth playing, if that makes sense. It probably doesn't, but it's the best way I can explain Sisters vs. Sisters. Because like the story itself is great. I love the story. The story itself is great. The combat can be a little hit or miss depending on how you play games. This is the best the models has ever looked, because they have new models, they have a new look, and everything about it is fresh because it's the latest game, and they move from using the old models for this game, so it's really good. After that, mostly, like I said, everything else is kind of freeball of what you want to go through. But if I was going to say anything for side games after that, is Blanc and Zombies is a fun game because it's a fun Muso hack and slash game. You get to team up with two different Neptunia character. You get to fight between a bunch of different Neptunia bosses and stuff and enemies, and it's a lot of fun if you like Muso games. Neptunia U is another Muso game that's a lot of fun, that you get to blow through enemies and have a lot of fun and kind of see them in a whole new way. And it has story, it has voice acting, and you can play these all on Steam right now, or if you have Vita, you can play them that way. I would love for them to do a like side game compilation, because we haven't had that recently. I mean, I know they're just starting to do a compilation of the trilogy, but I would love for them to do one of the past side games, because you don't have a way to play these on console right now. But then I would say the next one, the best to play, is Neptunia versus Sega Horror Girls. Now, to explain Sega Horror Girls, it was a group of idols, but also video game characters that was representative off of the actual Sega consoles, Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, Sega Mega Drive, and all these other stuff. So they brought them together in a fun, unique way. But the one thing I love about this game is that they focused on a character that you wouldn't think they would focus on, which is Iffy, who plays the main role of this game. It is the first time they ever did a character that was a side character. And this game did a lot more unique stuff, like you were able to grapple on hooks and wires, you get to crawl under spaces. It didn't have the typical button mash combinations of the other games. It had like, you get to press like one button for all the seamless actions. It was just a lot of fun. It had a lot of unique ideas with it, and I like the concept. Then after that, you should play Neptunia Hyperdimension Noir, which the one thing about this game that I love and hate, I love that it's a tactical RPG, a real tactical RPG, and it plays out really well, and the story is really well. I just didn't get the good vibes from the chibi models. I didn't particularly care for them, but I didn't hate them either. This kind of took a more goofy spoof approach, and I just didn't like that. I don't know. I didn't like it. It was fun. It was a fun game. Don't get me wrong. The game was fun as hell. But I just think the chibi models was a little off-putting for me. I don't know if other people felt that way, but for me it was. Then Super Neptunia RPG, which is the first time they ever went literally 2D, and it was on a flat plane. And I'm gonna be honest, I can't really give too high praise on this because I didn't finish this game. Not that it was boring, I just didn't have the time to finish playing it. Someone else could probably elaborate on RPG in the comments if they want to. After all these games, I feel like you should play this one because this is a complete different vibe of all these games. The one thing I guess I can give credit to Neptunia is that they're always trying new things with the series so it doesn't get stale. Sometimes they stray a little too far with their imaginations, but I don't want them to stop trying new things with the Neptunia franchise because that's what makes it unique. Because that's the whole idea about Neptunia in the first place, that it's a parody of things that's happening within the gaming space already. The next one I would say to play is the latest game that came out, Game Maker R Revolution. That is such a mouthful to say. I don't know if that's the same for other people. Maybe they can say it fluently without stumbling over their freaking words, but every time I'm saying that sentence, I feels like I'm having a seizure. Every time is Game Maker R Evolution. And it's a fun ass game. It's a fun ass game. I only played a little bit so far, and I really want to stream this, but I've been playing Stellar Blade and trying to get past that, and trying to finish Princess Peach Showtime before I dive into this. So I haven't really truly been able to play it, but it's a fun ass game. And I love the visuals. I love the concept that they're focusing on adult Nep versus young Nep. Not that I hate young Nep. I love young Nep. But adult Nep has so much care and potential, and you'll understand once you play all these other games to understand. So I do love the concept of this game. So I'm really looking forward to playing this. The next game after that you can play is Neptunia versus Senra Kagura, which I'm not really going to explain Senra Kagura in this video because that is a whole other video, because there's a lot to know about Senra Kagura. But the short version of it, Senra Kagura is a game, a hack and slash game that features ninjas and all different types of schools within the game, in the anime, in the game. And essentially they, after so many times, they get knocked around and they clothes fall off, and it's pretty much a Muso hack and slash technical. It's not technical, but it has some technicalness about it. And the sad part about it is that the people who made the Senra Kagura games didn't make this game. It was another company that all helps makes the games for Neptunia sometimes, which is Tamsa, and it didn't play like a Senra Kagura game at all. It was like an attempt to play like the Senra Kagura games, but it didn't do the same stuff as a Senra Kagura game. And we haven't had a Senra Kagura game, a true one, since 2017, which was like the last game we ever had was Peach Ball on the Switch. And then now we're probably never going to get one because the person who made the Senra Kagura games left Marvelous because he hated that his game kept getting censored, which I expect because, like, I hate that too. Then the last games that you should kind of worry about, but you don't have to worry about, is Neptunia Shooter, which actually before that is Top Nep, because Top Nep is the best Nep, and Top Nep features the adult Neptune, and it's an on-rail shooter that is essential to Space Harrier, which is a Sega Genesis game where it was an on-rail shooter, but you went forwards and you were shooting a bunch of stuff. The one thing I love about this game is the fact that, if you don't know, as I've been saying since this entire video, that the Neptunia franchise is a parody of the actual gaming consoles. Neptune is the representation of the Sega Neptune that never released, which the console was the 32-bit console that Sega was trying to bring out, but they didn't, and they brought out the 32X instead, which was a terrible decision in itself, but that's a whole conversation for another day. But the point is I think it's funny that it's a full circle around. The Sega Genesis came out, Neptunia's franchise came out, representing Sega, and then they did a Sega-like game that represents the Sega Genesis. It's like a full circle, and I just love that. And then the same thing with Neptunia Shooter, which is a flat 2D arm rail shooter. And then there's Virtual Stars. I don't know how to explain this game. This game is essentially Neptunia trying to be VTubers, but they are not VTuber themselves. They're like meeting other VTubers when the VTuber boom was really happening. It's a Neptunia game. It's still fun for the story, at least. When it comes to the story, you never can really go wrong with Neptunia story-wise. Essentially, this is what the order I would recommend people play in this entirety. Now, again, take this video with a grain of salt. You can play these games however you want. Whichever game that looks most appealing to you, just go ahead and play it. I will only say, as long as you play these 4 games first, every other game after that, you can play however you want, because there's not really a true way to play the side games because they're side games. But the idea is that sometimes they'll reference other things in other games. But that is just my opinion. But this is the best way I can recommend new fans who wants to get into the Neptunia franchise and didn't have an idea of how to get into the franchise, would love to start playing the games in a correct order. So that is what I recommend. If you guys enjoyed this type of video and you want to see more like it, let me know by hitting the like button and subscribing for more. And also, you can click this video right here to talk about more Neptunia videos. If you enjoy this video, go ahead, click on it. It will explain a lot of stuff that's going on with Neptunia right now.
Seems like the life I feel. Seems like the life I feel a little distant. Yeah. Seems like the life I need. Seems like the life I need a little